Do you still remember Tower of Fantasy, the anime MMO that wanted to get a piece of the pie during the whole Genshin boom, but then gloriously crashed into a wall with its gacha system? Tower of Fantasy has now tried again, without gacha. They removed the gacha mechanics, or to be more precise, they set up new servers where gacha mechanics are not included, or at least are not supposed to be included, and they hope that this will make things better. I took a look at the whole thing, and I'll briefly explain what has changed and whether Tower of Fantasy has now become a good free-to-play MMO, or if it's still basically the same Tower of Fantasy, just without gacha. These so-called warp servers now allow players to actually obtain weapons and gear through gameplay, events, daily activities, typical MMO stuff that you can now use to unlock things. It's being said that it's no longer gambling or pay-to-win casino. And that does sound promising at first, since this has always been a major criticism of Tower of Fantasy. Of course, the whole thing still needs to be financed, and they're not simply offering everything for free. We're dealing with the classic free-to-play business model, which includes an in-game shop and an in-game currency. Since gacha is now gone, there needs to be a traditional trading system, as well as the new in-game currency called Dark Crystals. With Dark Crystals, you can buy resources, but also trade them, something that is actually pretty typical for modern free-to-play MMOs. And what else do free-to-play models always include? A season system. This now also exists on the Warp servers. Each season brings its own progression, game modes, and rewards like outfits and the usual season pass content everyone knows. At the time of the announcement, when everything was heavily marketed with "there's no gacha anymore, we now have warp servers," it wasn't clearly communicated what this would cost or what it would actually look like. That's already an indicator that this is more appearance than substance, and that it's mostly a PR move to say, okay, players don't like gacha, so let's just say there's no gacha anymore. But the underlying goal, making money, remains, and the lack of understanding of what actually makes a good game seems to take a back seat. To strengthen the MMO feeling, several features were also promised or teased. There is supposed to be a crew base now, a social area where players can hang out and interact with each other. Whether that is really the core element of an MMO is questionable. It already shows that this isn't about identifying weaknesses and asking why the game isn't a good MMO, but rather about presenting a few marketable features and calling it a day. Overall, the information at launch was very vague and followed a broader trend. Struggling gacha games suddenly switching their messaging to, "We're free to play now, no more gacha." But, as we've seen repeatedly, that alone isn't enough. Those games still fail to convince. That's also the case here. You quickly notice that many of these games don't have much to offer beyond gacha. That doesn't mean they're necessarily bad, but the road from a gacha game to a genuinely good MMO is very long. Back to the Warp servers by Hada Studio, and the new system without gacha. You now earn weapons and gear through gameplay. However, even if it no longer calls itself gacha, it's not entirely clear that it isn't still essentially gacha under the hood. Tower of Fantasy removed gacha, but one of the things many people hate most about live service games, daily chores and constant do this, do that, is still fully intact. You might not pull on banners anymore, but you now do a lot of work just to get one random weapon per day. Pay money and you get more chances. That's still a luck-based system that feels like gacha, just under a different name. So is Tower of Fantasy truly free to play now? Technically, yes. Everything can be unlocked, but you can still spend money to get weapons faster, buy materials, or level up more quickly. It's less pay to win and more pay to skip the grind, which can still be a problem in an MMO. The core issue remains. The game itself hasn't been fundamentally reworked. They removed the obvious gacha mechanics, but not the deeper gameplay problems. In some ways, things even got worse due to increased grind. The combat system lacks depth, has few skills, and everything is mapped to the same buttons. That's simply not enough for an MMO. Meaningful MMO content is missing. No legendary drops, no secrets, no real incentive to explore. The grind feels meaningless because progress is still heavily limited. Even on the new servers, there are stamina limits, restrictions everywhere, and a daily grind with strict caps. To be fair, there are some positive developments. Player trading, more social features, and a better basic foundation. This might only be the first step, but as things stand right now, Tower of Fantasy is not out of the woods yet. Tower of Fantasy removed gacha, but not the underlying gacha-driven structures. It's a step in the right direction, but too small, probably too late, and too half-hearted. The path toward becoming a real MMO is still very long. At the moment, I wouldn't recommend the game to MMO players. If you generally like gacha games and anime MMOs, though, you can take a look. It is free after all. What do you think? Have you tried the Warp servers? Is Tower of Fantasy better without gacha, or is it just too grindy? Let me know in the comments.